All right, so let's talk about chapter 19, the kidneys. Okay, so the functions of the kidney, the anatomy, the overview. These three things I want you guys to cover. You should have learned it already in anatomy lecture. So we'll try to fast forward through that. Okay, what we'll focus is the 19.4 to 19.7. Okay. Okay. So the functions of the kidneys. Okay. Tubular elements, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Anatomy summary. Okay. Okay. So kidneys. Okay. The overview of kidney function. The kidneys have to do three things: filtration, reabsorption, secretion. Okay. Okay. Hold on a second. Okay, so we'll start really from here. So kidneys filter, reabsorb, and secrete. Okay, filtration occurs from the blood, okay, into the lumen of the nephron. This occurs at the renal corpuscle, which is the glomerulus plus the Bowman's capsule. Okay, the fluid is leaked out of the glomerulus. It is caught by the Bowman's capsule. Okay, this filtered plasma is now called filtrate. Okay, the next thing is filtrate. Okay, is a lot of fluid. It's 54 liters or something per day. Obviously, you're not peeing 54 liters per day. Okay, materials from the filtrate are passed back into the blood. Okay, it occurs within the peritubular capillaries. And last but not least, secretion. You purposely dump things from the blood into the capillaries. Okay. Okay. So what you filter out the stuff, you reabsorb most of it, and you dump some extra stuff, and together, okay, after everything's done, that's where you end up peeing out. Okay, that's what you end up eliminating. What you end up eliminating is about a liter and a half per day, considering your average. Okay. Okay, so here's what nephrons look like. Okay, here is a simpler version of it. Okay, all right. So this is a simpler version of it. Okay, just makes things easier to describe. Okay, all right. Okay, the filtrate, okay, is almost identical to the plasma and the renal corpuscle. Basically, that's all that is. Everything coming through is almost identical to plasma, with the exception of large proteins. Okay. Okay. You make actually overall you make 180 liters of filtrate per day. Okay. The filtrate is at 300 milliosmolar. Okay. Just like plasma is. Okay. Okay. You reabsorb, okay. 70% of filtrate is reabsorbed by the proximal convoluted tubules, mostly solutes and water. Okay, salt it reabsorbs a lot of sugar. It reabsorbs a lot of amino acids, and water follows these things. Okay, so you reabsorb most of the water in the proximal convoluted tubule. Okay. And the filtrate in the loop of Henle, you actively reabsorb solutes, so salt, okay? So you end up being more diluted than the blood plasma, okay? So your urine is a little bit more diluted than the blood plasma, okay? You coming out of the loop of Henle, you have 18 liters per day, so even more reabsorbed. And then this whole convoluted tubule and collecting duct, you're working on more reabsorption and secretion, and you end up with a half a liter a day. Okay. And that, or sorry, a liter and a half a day. Okay. And that concentration, it depends on your hydration state. And we'll talk much more about that when we talk about the distal convoluted tubule collecting duct. Okay. Because the proximal convoluted tubule, the loop of Henle, and the renal corpuscle, that's definite. That doesn't change. Okay, the distal loop of the distal convoluted tubule collecting duct, that does change. That is the part that your body can alter depending on your water needs. Okay, so the first three parts are kind of automatic and will happen no matter what. The last part you can alter and you can adjust dramatically. Okay. So, like in normal cases, right? If you have enough water, you're peeing out at 100 milliosmolar, just like that. However, if you're really dehydrated, you can make it really concentrated. You make it 12 times as concentrated, right? So you're peeing out a lot less water, a lot less urine, okay? But you're still getting rid of all your urea and other stuff, okay? Okay. So make sure you're pretty familiar with this picture, okay? Okay, in this chart, okay, and this equation, because I will ask you to use this equation, okay? All right, so now filtration, okay? Filtration fraction is the percent of renal flow that flows into the tubule, okay? The renal corpuscle contains filtration barriers, okay? So let's look at the filtration barriers. Okay, so here you can see, okay, the afferent arteriole, the efferent arteriole. In between, you have the glomerulus, and the glomerulus is surrounded by these cells called podocytes. And you can see what they really look like. Okay, so things can leak out of these holes. Okay, so here I have some important features. Okay, I have some macular density here, which I don't talk about yet, but let's talk about it. Okay. Okay, so again, I can filter things here. Okay, so let's talk about filtering. Okay, first of all, the filtration occurs in the renal corpuscle. Okay, you have fenestrated capillaries, and then they're surrounded by podocytes with filtration slits. Okay. 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 So there are three pressures that causes filtration. Okay. One is the capillary pressure. Okay, that's the average pressure of all the blood running through the capillaries. Okay. Second is the capillary colloid osmotic pressure. Due to the proteins in the plasma, there's no proteins in the filtrate, so the plasma tends to suck some of the fluid back in because it has the proteins. Okay, so proteins generate osmotic pressure, so it pulls some of it back in. So this is about 55 millimeters of mercury. This is about 30. So already you can tell the filtration pressure is stronger. Okay, the last one is capillary fluid pressure. So as the capillary capsule, as Bowman's capsule fills, it's like filling a water balloon. It puts pressure back on and wants to squeeze some of the pressure back into the tube. Okay, so there's a hydrostatic pressure inside Bowman's capsule that pushes some of the fluid back into the capillary. Okay, but the net pressure is still 10 millimeters of mercury into Bowman's capsule. Okay. Okay. So. Okay, next concept you definitely have to understand is something called GFR. GFR is the volume of fluid filtered per unit time. Okay, the amount of filtrate that you are making. Okay, it is influenced by net filtration rate. Okay, and the filtration coefficient. How much blood you have, and how effective you are at filtering the blood. Okay. All right, GFR is primarily controlled by regulating blood flow. Okay, so if I increase blood flow, I get more pressure, more filtration. Okay, if I decrease blood flow, I get less pressure, less filtration, less GFR. Okay. Okay, so I have an A fluid material and E fluid material. Okay, so let's look at the A fluid material. Okay. Okay. If I open this up bigger, okay, I have more fluid coming in. If I have more fluid coming in, that increases, and therefore it pushes more fluid out. Okay, if I decrease that, then less fluid comes in, less pressure, okay, and less GFR. Okay, conversely, I can also alter this. Okay, if I make this hole bigger, then more fluid will just pass through and not leak out. So I'll decrease filtration pressure. If I was to tighten this, okay, I would increase pressure here and more would leak out. Okay. 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 So resistance changes. Okay. So again, if I was to increase this pressure here, I could decrease GFR. Okay. If I was to open this up wider, then I could increase GFR. Okay. The same way I decrease this, I could increase GFR. Okay. I can do one or the other. Okay. 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 So the most important one of these three, the biogenic response is just a normal response to blood pressure. The tubular glomerular feedback, this is the most important one. Okay. You have the juxtamedullary apparatus. Okay, so there. Okay, this thing measures the amount of salt in the urine, and in response to high salt levels, it releases the enzyme renin. Okay, renin gets your body to retain water. Okay, eventually through the renin angiotensin aldosterone pathway. Okay. All right. So here is the macula densa, okay, and the juxtamedullary apparatus. Okay, these guys can alter the diameter of these two tubes. Okay, so it basically the macula densa, what it does, if there's too low blood pressure, okay, it decreases this, so you have less filtering and you increase body blood pressure. Okay. Okay. So the juxtaglomerular apparatus. Okay. 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 So you can control GFR this way. Okay. Okay. Share screen. So,
the rate at which the kidneys form filtrate determines how rapidly the blood is cleansed of metabolic wastes, excess ions, and toxins. It's also a key player in the kidney's other homeostatic functions. The total amount of filtrate formed by all the renal corpuscles in both kidneys per minute is called the glomerular filtration rate, or GFR. Normal kidneys produce about 125 milliliters, or about half a cup, of filtrate per minute. To maintain a normal GFR, the body adjusts the glomerular blood flow to maintain a nearly constant glomerular hydrostatic pressure, or GHP. It does this by changing the diameter of the afferent arteriole. Let's use a real situation to see how this works. An emergency room nurse is charting steadily but calmly at her desk. Her blood pressure is 110/70 millimeters of mercury, and her mean arterial pressure, or MAP, is 83 millimeters of mercury. Suddenly, a code blue is announced, and the nurse leaps into action. As she runs to the patient in cardiac arrest, her MAP spikes to 97 millimeters of mercury. If her glomerular arterioles remained at their normal diameter, the increase in GHP would cause a similar increase in GFR, potentially leading to dehydration. However, the increase in her mean arterial pressure causes her afferent arterioles to vasoconstrict. This limits glomerular blood flow so that GHP and GFR remain normal. Once her patient stabilizes, the nurse's activity and stress levels decline, and her MAP returns to normal. Her afferent arterioles vasodilate to maintain normal GHP and GFR. With the crisis over, our nurse takes a brief nap. Her MAP drops well below the average of 83 millimeters of mercury. If the diameter of her afferent arterioles did not change, this reduction in pressure would decrease the glomerular hydrostatic pressure and hence the glomerular filtration rate. However, her afferent arterioles respond by vasodilating, thus increasing blood flow to the glomerulus and maintaining GHP and GFR.
Okay. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Okay. All right. Okay, so that's glomerular filtration rate. Okay, the next thing is reabsorption. Okay, okay, so you made something like 180 liters of fluid, okay, through per day through GFR, right, glomerular filtration rate. Now you need to reabsorb most of that because you're not peeing out 180 liters. Okay. Okay, so reabsorption might be active or passive. Okay. Um, there is going to be active transport of sodium, so it's going to create. Okay, so when you actively transport sodium, it's going to cost you some ATP, but it's going to create a nice scenario because it creates an electron gradient, which you'll take advantage of later. You're also going to anions will follow things that are positively charged, and that creates osmotic gradient because all the salt is on one side, and then water follows the salt, right? Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, so secondary active transport, okay, you can import with Na plus. Okay, so remember we established a gradient of sodium. So sodium now wants to come back into the filtrate. So I take sodium, I suck it all out of the filtrate. Now the sodium really wants to come back, and I can use it as a form of secondary active transport. So this is how I move glucose, amino acids, and other organic molecules. Okay. Passive reabsorption, urea. Okay. And then endocytosis, entire plasma proteins. Okay. 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 So I reabsorb sodium by active transport. So this will cost me my ATP, but then I move anion, so mostly chloride across along with the sodium. Okay, water will follow. Okay, and along with that water flowing through, you have permeable solids that are reabsorbed by diffusion. So calcium, urea, and potassium naturally flow through. Okay, now remember I have a hot pumping sodium, okay, here, okay, but as soon as I pump in sodium, I actually pump it through to the other side. So I keep the sodium low inside the proximal columnar tubule. So sodium comes in, okay, and I bring it, I use it to bring in glucose through the glucose transporter, okay? And I constantly pump. As soon as I pump glucose in, I pump glucose out, and that allows me to bring in more glucose. Okay. All right. So only so many of these pumps exist. So if I increase a little bit, that's fine. I can just increase the speed of those pumps. But if I increase too much, then I can saturate and completely overwhelm those pumps. And that's how glucose ends up in the urine. Okay. So as you at low levels, it increases, doesn't matter. The amount you increase is the amount you suck up. But at some point, you're hitting maximum. Okay. When you're hitting maximum, okay, there is no more everything's working at threshold. So you end up leaking glucose into your blood, into your urine stream, and then that is that's a sign of diabetes. Okay. Okay. So this slide we've talked about a little bit already. Okay. All right. The last thing, secretion. Secretion is the movement of active molecules from the extracellular fluid into the nephron lumen. Okay. It is an important regulator of potassium and hydrogen, H+. So secretion is things that we want to get rid of. Okay. So if we have too much potassium, we dump it into the urine, purposely push it into the urine. If we have too much acid, we dump H+ directly into the urine. Okay. Increasing secretion increases nephron excretion. So whatever you secrete, okay, you pee out. Okay. So secretion. Okay, remember secretions you're dumping from the interstitial fluid into the lumen. Okay, so here you're dumping things into the lumen. So the organic anion transporter is how you dump things. Okay, you don't have to know the tertiary anion transport. That's a little complicated. Okay, excretion is filtration minus reabsorption plus secretion. So filtration is how much you filter it out. Whatever you reabsorb. Okay, if you don't reabsorb it, you pee it out, right? And then plus the last thing, the secretion. The secretion is the stuff that you purposely want to dump. So together, that is excretion. Okay, clearance is a non-invasive way to measure GFR. So it's the rate at which a solute disappears from the body by excretion or by metabolism. Okay, usually what you want to calculate is a GFR that's independent of metabolism. Okay, the best example of this is something called inulin as a polysaccharide. It's fully filterable. It's very easily filterable, but it's neither reabsorbed or secreted. So all I get is filtration. So I know the ideal way to measure GFR is to take these two out of the equation somehow. So I have to find compounds that are neither reabsorbed or secreted, right? So things like sugar are going to be reabsorbed. So you can't use sugar. You can't use salt because salt will be reabsorbed. You only use something that will not be reabsorbed, nor will be secreted. Okay. Creatinine, for example, is not reabsorbed, but some of it is secreted, especially if you exercise a lot. Okay. Substances. Okay. Excretion is filtration, but okay, so this is definitely it. The filtration rate of X is the amount of concentration X in the plasma times the GFR. Okay, so that's how much is filtered. The excretion rate is the amount that you're actually peeing out times the concentration in the urine. Okay. So, media clearance. So here, okay, indolent, again, there's only filtration, there is no reabsorption, there is no secretion. So whatever you get into the filtrate is what you pee out. This is not true for glucose. Glucose, you try to reabsorb as much as possible. Okay. Okay. If the clearance is less than the GFR, then there's reabsorption. If clearance is greater, then somewhere you're pushing extra in. And then if they're equal, then there's neither reabsorbed or secreted. Okay. Okay. So we'll skip my correction. All right. Cool. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys.